The 1995 series, and what we have to do is finish up the making of the ribs from the previous tape. It didn't all fit on one tape. We'll start out with that part of the tape. That's from 1992, I believe. We'll finish up that footage and then we'll get into jigging up the wing here. We're pretty much excited about getting this wing going. You just shave it. Just take shavings. You can see how tiny they come off in very small pieces. Don't worry about any of the notches at this time. Just do the light cutting. Get them all bent down nice and even. You're going to get your best result when you just shave it. Very little pieces. Don't try to take a big chunk off at any given time. Very slow, very easy. Again, I'll work this side up. This side I haven't started yet. And then we'll get into putting the notches in. Yeah. Well, that was... Now I'm just finalizing the fit in with the block, a nice wide block, some 100 grit. And you have to be real careful now that you're not making a bow out of the top of this. You really want to make sure you sand right into both templates at the same time. I've got this side finished, and you can see the block touches all of the ribs. You want to sand right into the templates. You don't want to have a bow or a hump there. So again, this is just going to take some time. And you just got to be willing to pay the price and breathe some sawdust here. We're closing in on having our ribs. Again, as you do them, take a straight edge and just make sure, now see, I can rock this. Okay, just want to keep checking it. All right, getting down there. Now when you get down to the very end, how you're going to know it's perfect is you'll be actually sanding into the plywood as you follow the form. You'll actually be sanding a little bit of the plywood away. And if you're really in doubt, you can put a little ink line on the plywood. You just go back and forth like this, and when you've sanded the ink off, you know you have it perfect. Now we're right at the end of this right now. Now we're going to start cutting the notches. So what I like to do is take a zona saw and walk right down the center first. Try to connect the center lines. Okay, you're right on the center line. And now you can just notch it out little by little. It's important to get the line right on the center line. And when you're finished, now you can take, this is again a sanding block with some rough sandpaper, and line up the 90-degree edge, and we want to go right into the plywood. When you feel you're touching the plywood on both sides, you know you have it. You don't want to make the hole any bigger, but you don't want to have a bow in it either. And you can see how nice that notch does work. Now we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to connect the dots with a Zona saw and then just chip away at that little piece up there. Now if you just work your way gently down, you'll feel you're going to run into the plywood on both sides. Okay. Okay, we've run into the plywood on both sides. Now it's just a question of chip some of this out little by little. Now ones that go a little too deep, it's not a problem because you can just end the spar even with the top of the wing. But you don't want to have it too small or else the spar is going to stick up and you're going to have a lumpy airfoil. Now what I've done is take 3 pieces of 1/16 and 100 grit sandpaper, and that gives you just about the right dimension just to clean up. It gives you a nice clean notch, and it'll be just undersized enough that the notch will stick in there when you put a piece of 1/4 inch in there. Now what I did, I hope you enjoyed that little thing with the ribs. What I still have to do with these ribs, I may as well do it off camera. I'm just going to take the old templates, line up the ribs on the front since this is it's after the fact now, and take my old templates and cut the notch in here with a Zona saw and pick the piece out. That'll be the last thing we have to do before jigging up the wing. I took out my rods and I noticed these are the ones Joe Adamusco gave me, and these are stainless steel and they're in perfect condition. You see, this is tubing. I have some big pieces of tubing. I have some stainless which has no rust on it at all. I have these that are kind of rusty, are the ones I've built planes on before. But I have these real nice stainless ones. I'm going to cut the size. I decided not to use the tubing even though it looks like it would work. This tubing has a bend in it. See the bend in the tubing? And rather than try to straighten it out, what I'm going to try to do is use the 2 solid stainless steel ones that are in nice shape. Now the first thing I want to do, I want to cut them to size so they're not any bigger than they have to be. I'll do that with a hacksaw, of course. I want to cut them till they're just big enough. The reason for that is then I don't have all the weight. I don't want to make this a 400-pound wing jig. Another thing too is I'm rolling them on a table to see if they're perfectly straight. This one looks real good. This one's good. If you look at the tubing one, you can see that. Forget about the tubing. And I will not try to rebend that. I'm sure you could rebend it and then get it to roll. These are the 2 rusty ones we've used in the past, and many people have borrowed them and brought them back rusty. Having stainless steel now is a nice little touch. When I cut these, I'll also chamfer the edge so I can slide the ribs on. Another thing too, I'm going to take some Simonize and wax these real good. Put a real good coat of wax on them so that the ribs slide right on. So let me cut these off camera and we can start jigging this up. Now I'm just wiping off the last little bit of Simonize. A good coat of wax, any kind of car wax is fine. It puts a nice polished surface. Now what I wanted to show on the video, if you really don't have access to a machine shop, Dave Midgley made these. Number one, you could borrow them from me. That would be one choice. We're going to cut holes in the plans to line up our rods. And this is basically how a wing like this starts. I took out the templates from last year. If you really don't have access to a machine shop, 2 pieces of light ply with a center line so that the center line is the same distance on top and bottom. You need a couple extra holes in the end so you can lay your lead outs out the wing when you get to that point. So one side needs lead out holes, one side doesn't. I got the original templates from last year, and I'll use these to carve my notches so that the sheeting, we know the sheeting worked out pretty much the way we wanted it to. I can use this to lay it out on those ribs that Joe already made. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to have to, actually one of the things I'm going to have to do, I see the way Joe made these, he puts his holes in a different spot than I do. You can see the holes are in a different spot. And what I'm going to have to do is, it looks like I'm going to have to re-drill this, or re-notch it as the case may be, so that, well, I can use the same holes that Joe was using. So I got a couple little machine shop operations to do here. I'm going to take care of that right now. Get the rods ready and get ready to jig this down. I'm psyched. I'm ready to build a wing. Usually at this point, this is like the day of giving birth. I don't know, you get all these parts and ribs and blah, 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 and you get all psyched, and the night before you do this, you're thinking, new built up wing, blah, 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 blah. You know, Borelli will be jealous, and all this stuff. All right, so I got to do a little work on these. I got to do some work on the wing ribs, and I got to finalize cutting the rod, and then we'll be ready to jig this up. Piece of junk hacksaw blade. Forget about it. Anyway, the reason I'm showing this is because Joe puts his rib holes in a different spot than me. I need quite a bit of machine work and fooling around to use his ribs, but I don't want to destroy the template, so I'm going to kind of redo, actually I'm going to redo everything here so that I can use these rods. Now you really need to have a nice smooth end on these, countersunk a little bit, otherwise you break the ribs putting them on the rods. Now there's 100 little tricks when you're making one of these rod wings, and getting these rods chamfered and polished with about 3 or 4 good coats of Simonize is really an important part of making this wing an effortless thing. Well, what I'm doing, I'm trying to do a little test fit here before we actually put the ribs on. I haven't cut the notches in the ribs yet. I just kind of lay everything out here, and I want to explain how I've done this. This may be a big help. I have Mylar plans that I'm going to work off, but I'm going to hot stuff these right to the table once the wing is in place. So I've cut slots in the plans that pretty much, and I've made them oversized, pretty much so I can move these around, because what I'm eventually going to do is line up off the trailing edge with a triangle down all the ribs, get these in position, and then C8 them right in. So I really wanted to check, most of all, that the rods fit. I had to gouge out the end caps here. I wanted to make the rods just long enough, and then I need to get some kind of support in the middle that'll be a mirror image of the outside, something I can use a balsa block. Actually, I can use a hardwood block piece of plywood. But just do a little test fit and make sure these rods, everything is square. Once I get this squared off, the next step is I'm going to cut the notches in the ribs, and we'll be ready to jig this wing up. Now what I did, I put some pins through the templates. These are the templates from last year, from Tsunami actually. They match up perfectly with Joe's ribs, of course. Now while they're connected like this, and they're all nice and together, I have the notches from here. This is a nice little trick if you want to put notches in. I'm going to have to answer the phone here. President Nixon calling. Where's Wendy? See, that's just one more reason why I like to have templates for everything. These templates just save me from having to plot out each one of these slots individually. I got all the slots in. Now what I'm going to do is do a little mock test fit of the wing. I'll save the templates, of course. Never throw the templates away. Invest in some 16th plywood. Make yourself templates for every plane you build. What we really want to do here is just lay out the wing like a mock layup of the wing. The purpose of this is, having everything laid out here, I can take my 90-degree triangle, line up the trailing edge where that'll be, and then I can glue the templates in, the end plates. I need to get the end plates glued in. Also, I have all the templates here. I try to keep them all together. So let me see if I can lay this all out. I don't have much time yet. It's almost time to go to work today. I'll try to get this, laid out before I go to work, and I'll feel like I really accomplished something today. Now, a couple of things. I tried to start out by using these blocks to hold the wing up while I put the rods on. Didn't work out the way I wanted to. So what I did, I kind of improvised here. I used one block down at the other end, rest a pillow on it. That keeps the rods nice and stationary. And some kind of a solid block in the middle. This is a box full of wrenches. Just to hold this nice and solid while you slide the first set of ribs on. Now, believe it or not, figuring that out is a little bit of a pain in the neck, but once you figure it out, of course, you're finished. You've got it made. So I'm going to put this cap down at the other end now and line up the trailing edge, then reverse this, go down to the other side, and slide the ribs on from the other side. Now I dropped this end plate on. Believe it or not, this takes a little bit of ingenuity here. And I want to leave just a little bit of the rod sticking out so this doesn't slide away. You wouldn't want the rods to be slipping out during the time that you're working on a wing. A little piece of tape on one side here will do the trick. And then what I'm going to do is glue this piece right into position so I don't have to fool around here anymore. We'll have one piece on, one less thing flopping around here. Now, before you can glue this down, you want to get the trailing edge on enough of the ribs equal. You can maneuver it around a little bit if you have to. In fact, this has to go forward just a little bit. This is actually the hardest part of building the whole wing, is getting all the ribs on the rods. So if you can use these little tricks to your advantage, great. And we'll just take a little and adjust this now. Working right off the plan here. Now we can take some CA, glue it right to the table. Don't be cute about it. Get some glue on there. Now you also want to make some provision up here so that this rod can't move. This is solid as a rock now to the table. Now you can slide this around. Now you have some working room. I'm putting some thin tape here just to keep the rods from going in either direction as I work on them or adjust the ribs. Because don't forget, we're going to line up every one of these ribs now carefully. And we'll work right off the plans. So a little piece of tape here. What this does, it keeps the rod from moving back and forth every time you go to work on this. And when you're all done, you just take the tape right off. I've left the plate far enough away from the end of the wing so that, of course, I don't run into a conflict of interest here. Okay, that rod still has a little play in it either way. Just tighten up so there's no play in the rod. Use a little bit extra tape if you have to. Actually, it sits pretty solid once you get a couple of the ribs and trailing edge glued in, but for right now, that's pretty solid. Now another thing, when you cut ribs in a stack, you notice they all have a little bit of an angle on them. Don't sand the angle off. Leave the angle on there or you change the shape of the airfoil, but what you have to do is make sure they all go in with the same angle. You can't have one backwards, frontwards, backwards, frontwards. All of the angles on these ribs face outward. Same thing on the outside. I'm going to start sliding these ribs on, one right after another. Now as I'm rolling each one on here, I'm making sure I have the angle right from the carving, and also roughly try to get each one over the station where it's going to be. Doesn't have to be within a couple of thousandths now, but just kind of keep each one in line as you go. Just makes it a lot easier in the final analysis. And you can slide the ribs, of course, up and down the rods as you go. What I did, I picked this up with this stick, line this block up. Of course, I'll have to line up the trailing edge here. And I can glue this aluminum block in place now. Now I want to get this rib lined up with the plans here. Once you get that lined up, you can get this 90 degrees to the trailing edge. And don't be afraid to glue this to the table, boy. Put some glue under there. Pretend Midgley was playing for the glue. Because if this jig falls over while you're building the wing, you could lose the wing or damage it. Now I did a little test to see if all the ribs kind of line up. Everything looks good. But what I'm doing now is making this tape on the rods permanent. The tape will hold the rods in position now. Oh, President Nixon, I'm busy, I'm busy. Don't ever open your own business. Now with the jig all solid to the table, tape on both ends, all the ribs in position. This is about all I'm going to be able to do today. We're going to put this aside till the next time we get to build and go help George dig some dirt. So keep in mind, this was, you know, some of the tips, some of the tricks will help you if you really want to do one of these rod wings. And obviously, if you live in the area, I can loan you the rods and the aluminum plates, or you can make the plywood ones yourself. So, all right, see you in the next session. This was nice that we got this all jigged up. I feel good about it. Now, there's a big significance to these shoes. We're just about finished, I guess, with the job by George's. All the dirt we've been moving lately, and I'm just about burned out with shoveling dirt anyway. The project has come out so well, we're all happy about it. Anyway, what I want to do today, I worked on this a little last night. I didn't shoot any footage. I made up a little go, no-go gauge, and you may want to do this. This is just a test. What a go and no-go gauge. Now, I made a little chart of where this had to be ground. What you do with a go, no-go gauge is you check that all along every rib station you're exactly the same height off the table. You can see how I'm doing that. This is a typical machinist thing. Now what happens up front here, we're not exactly tight. We're off by, you can see it wiggles a little bit. So what I'm going to do is grind into here just a little bit. The reason for that is I had to drill this hole, and probably the hole is a couple of thousandths off center, but I want to get it that at every station down there and every station over here I'm the same height. And to do that, what I'll do, because I'm using these were not the original holes that I was using, I had to drill another hole in there, and I'm off. I'm going to have to get this level and parallel to the table. Now remember, it's not important how you do it. You could do it with IBM cards, but you have to get it level. And what I did in the middle of this, I made up a, let's look at this real close. I made up a little support similar to what's shown on the cardinal plans, and then I shimmed it up with IBM cards and a couple of drops of glue just to hold it in position. Glued it right down to the plans. What that does, the rods are so heavy that they tend to sag in the middle, and this holds them up in position while you get the leading and trailing edges and sheeting and everything on. And then eventually you just pull that out and throw it away. Now before, I got a call from Joe Adamusco. One of the things we're trying to do is make the little exhaust stacks that go on STREGA and Tsunami. And you know, if you've watched the Tsunami videos, I fooled around for a whole week and never got a set of stacks I really like, so I never bothered even putting them on. And I want to make them more detailed than the Red Baron. Of all people, it came up with a great idea today. My mother comes up with this great idea. Take macaroni, cook it, and let it dry in a bent position. Now, I haven't tried that yet, but somebody out there that's a good cook, like Debbie Borelli, find me some big giant elbow macaronis that I can make exhaust stacks out of. Believe it or not, of all people too, Alan Ressinger, who has some of the nicest planes with scale exhaust stacks, wrote me a letter yesterday wanting to know how I made stacks on a Red Baron. Alan, you're supposed to be telling me. Anyway, I'm going to do this. I'll probably do most of this off camera. With the go, no-go gauge, I'm going to grind away a little bit here with a Dremel tool until every station, I can just put this in at every station, just like you would do a center line. Just every station here will be, you see where it just stays in there? That's going to be my go, no-go gauge. Now, if we're off by a couple of thousandths, it's really not the end of the world. But up here, we're off by maybe a 32nd of an inch. That's not going to be okay. So I'm going to grind that away until I have every station. And again, if you start out with these plates made accurately, if we made these out of wood, I could just sand one side of it, or I could unglue this off the table or whatever. But for right now, the easiest way, just to grind that away. And it doesn't matter how you do this. Another way to do this would be, and I don't want to do it this way, would be break the back of the plate off and put some IBM cards under here. But I want these plates as solid as possible. These plates have to hold everything in position. So I don't want to have some kind of flimsy thing where somebody's going to walk by the table and pop this with their elbow and the whole wing will fall off. Once you have this jig established and everything set just the way you want it, it's very important. Once it's accurate for the rest of your life. But right now we have to take the jig apart, put it back together. Take every time we build a plane. Would be nice, and I was thinking of this, just another idea, if somebody out there really wanted to be pro stunt. Take a hollow door, make a jig, it would have to be 60 by 12, and leave the plates right on the table. Leave the plans right under here, right under the glass. The plates right on there permanently. You'd have a permanent wing jig, and you could put it away at the end of the year, take it out, and you'd never have to do all this setup work. Once it would be set up once, you'd be done. But in our case, we're going to take it apart, put it back together every time. Now what happens if you grind just a little bit too much away? It's real easy to make the correction. Just use an IBM card. An IBM card is 5 thousandths. And eventually you'll get to the point where you have the gauge will just stick there. Still a little, should be a little tighter than that. Okay. Okay, now you may be thinking this is a really overkill getting this in within thousandths. Well, yes and no. But the more accurate I think you can get it right now, it pays to take an extra hour or so and get everything in the jig lined up just perfectly. Like I said, we don't have a permanent jig. We don't have right now. We may have in the future. And maybe what it would pay for us to do in the future, if we're going to build more and more of these wings, it seems like we build more and more of them, is make a permanent jig. Maybe I should get Midgley to make one. Anyway, we got one side perfectly true, and of course now you're in an ongoing thing of checking it. Constantly checking it. Now, as I said before, I'm just taking a little bit at a time, ever so little, until I get this. In fact, even get it on a tight side and then shim it with a little piece of IBM card. Oh, perfect. Oh my God, perfect. Okay. Now the last part of this we want to shim up is right on that center part. Now you can see this is a little tight. So I'm taking IBM cards, which are 5 thousandths each, and you can shim this very little, 5 thousandths at a time. Well, that was a little bit too much. We can take one IBM card out at a time. until we have that nice, just a tight press fit on the go, no-go gauge. There it is, it sticks. There it is. Seems like it takes a lot of time to do this, but once it's right, you have yourself a straight wing, that's for sure. Now to get an idea, I'm just sighting down. I'm doing this with the lens. Sight down. So you can see you've got a really nice fit. You probably, thanks to Joe Adamusco, you probably won't even have to block sand these ribs in. Every part of this looks perfect. It really does pay to take the time to do this part of it. I know this part of it, this is the one part probably everybody you know, that does one of these wings isn't crazy about doing. And this may be the last time I have to do it. Like I said, once I make up a permanent jig, you only have to do this once. Take the rods out and build another wing. You really do spend more time when you have to tear this down. I've said that over and over, but it really is the truth. Okay, that, for all purposes now, we're ready to start gluing the wing together. Now the first thing we're going to do is make up the trailing edge. Now, I've rechecked this again, and I'm gluing in the shims is what I'm doing, so that the shims can't move or whatever can happen to them. Have this all level, shimmed. Nice idea now. Now, this is a new thing that I'm doing, and I thought about a good way to do this last night. Always trying to come up with an improved way of doing things. Always trying to come up with an improved way. One of the problems I've had in the past is you'd glue the trailing edge on the bottom of the trailing edge, and now the ribs are like dancing a little bit out of shape. Well, what I'm going to do now is make up the trailing edge. Mark the rib locations right off the plans, get a 90-degree triangle and put the lines on the wood, and then glue each rib in on a 90-degree angle, hopefully with exactly the right spacing. Remember that word, hopefully. Now, if you don't get these, I'm trying to do this by eyeball, if you don't get these ribs in, if they're in not level this way, or if they're front to back crooked, well, the wing is going to be not perfect. And in an attempt to make it perfect, I'll go over to the wood pile, find a piece of nice trailing edge, straight wood, cut the trailing edge, and then mark all these lines on it. And I hope that's going to be a little improvement over how we made this in the past. Now, one of the things we're going to try to do on this model, we're using a 1/2-inch trailing edge. The whole wing is going to be 3/32 instead of 16. So we're going to make the trailing edge thinner this way, but thicker wood, so we'll have more material to sand into. But one of the things I want to do, I want to make the trailing edge up perfectly straight. And to do that, I stripped out 2 pieces with a wood stripper. This is 3/32 wood. And I'm lining them up with my drawing on the trailing edge so they're perfectly straight. And then I made my little brace up. Now what I'm going to do, and this is a good way to do this, maybe something you can use here, I don't know, is just tape the part right onto the drawing so it's perfectly straight. See, this is one of the things, when you work alone, you find ways of doing things where, now if this was Monday night and we had a bunch of people here, we wouldn't have to do this. I'd just have Ron or somebody just hold this for me. But when you're working alone, you have to devise little ways of making the job easy. So we're taping this down, and this is something you probably can use in other places. By taping it down, and I'm using I know this is a perfectly straight line on a drawing. I don't want to have a trailing edge that walks down there like Mr. Snake or anything. Now with this piece, and this is one of the things that I feel like I do real well, is jigging and fixturing things up so that an average person can do them. Now you can see how I even have little bevels on that joint piece. Now I'm just going to put some CA on that, join that, and I'll have a one-piece trailing edge. And of course, if you do this with thin CA, for sure you'll glue it right down to the table. So this is just some thick CA. It's what's nice about working off of Mylar. You can position this And I'm using that trailing edge line so I don't build in any kind of crazy stresses here. Now when I'm going to mark the rib stations while I have this taped into position. I'm going to mark every rib station and put a line on it. Let's let this kick off here. Now I could line up the ruler with the rib, get that razor point marker and get a nice straight line. Move to the next one. Because the trailing edge is taped in position now, and it's perfectly straight, 90 degree to the table, this should be relatively accurate. You know, every little tip that you can pick up off of these videos, every little tip will make your modeling a lot more enjoyable. Right now, boy, just working on this exhaust stack thing with Joe Adamusco, I bet we spent $50 in phone calls trying to figure out how to make these exhaust stacks already. Anyway, it's those extra little things that make a model special, where you're not just building an ironing board or a, you know, something that mediocre or just like everybody else has. You want that thing where when you hand it to the judges in the front row, they just say, "Oh my God, this guy is just a little bit more awesome. Awesome, dude." Now with all the lines on a 90-degree angle, you just get the tape off here, and this is ready to put the bottom piece of the trailing edge on. We'll just tack glue it in place first on random spots. Let's see. And then what we're going to be real careful of is to line up each trailing edge piece with each rib. I got to make sure I line up each trailing edge with the rib, use my thumb as a little guide, and get the rib right on the line, nice and straight. Now once it's all tacked in position, I got one little drop on each piece, and you know it's straight. Just walk down each rib. I want to get a good glue joint here, nice and solid, because as we pull the rods out, we want to maintain that straight trailing edge. Getting a good glue joint in here is really important. And I don't mean a big globby thing, I mean just having it nice integrity, good integrity here. The whole advantage of building with the rods is the rods are holding us in position as the wood wants to twist and warp and bend and whatever else is happening here. But right till the last minute when you pull the rods out, it's holding it nice and straight, right in perfect alignment. Now what I'm going to do, after I set this, I'll have this half of the trailing edge in, I'll run around with the gauge and check that I haven't lost anything. Get my go, no-go gauge under here. Make sure I'm not, that's perfect. Just randomly check it, make sure it's not, I haven't built in any kind of a warp. Perfect. Now what I'm doing, I'm taking a piece of 1/16. I set the stripper up for the height of the ribs. And I want to strip off, I'm looking for, this piece is half C grain and half not, so I'll try to use up the part that's C grain. This edge here is C grain. Strip off a, I guess we'll strip off an extra piece even, just so we can, we'll have some extra while I got the stripper set. Anyway, what I want to do is box in this trailing edge. And this should keep it, being we've reduced the amount of width here, it should keep it warp free, at least to a big degree anyway. Alright, now what I'm going to do is set this in on an angle, so I'm going to start making my box. Now what I'm going to do is just randomly pick, well, I'll pick one rib here. Put a little notch in it. You're always better off zona sawing off when you're doing end grain. Make a nice tight fit. Make sure we're not sticking up above the rib too much. If we are, we can trim it down, sanding block it down, whatever. Okay. Now, this is what we're trying to accomplish, is we'll have a box trailing edge. And it's real important you have tight fits on all the ribs. Really important. This is what's going to do the job, is having this box section all along the end. Now what you may want to do, and I think I'm going to do it, is just have my little sanding block. You want an absolute tight fit here. It's the completing of the box that gives it the rigidity and the integrity. No big sloppy glue joint here. Now if it sticks up above even just a little bit, I don't want it sticking up, well, I can just give it one kiss with the sandpaper here. And obviously I'll just work my way down and do as far down. Well, the truth is you really don't have to go all the way down to the middle. I think we'll go about, the part of the wing that's going to warp is out here on the end. The middle isn't going to warp. Maybe we'll go down to rib 6 maybe on this. I don't know. Well, we'll get it down to 6 and then we'll make a decision. As you glue each one in, you might want to dress it off so you have a nice tight fit on the top. Now what I'm going to do, just to make it easy for myself, I'm going to put the trailing edge on top and just mark off exactly where this is going to end. It'll help me get the pieces aligned just right. I can line the trailing edge up nice and square. Again, the only part of the wing that's really going to warp is the second third of it, 2/3 of it maybe. In by the root, you're going to have all that extra sheeting. It's really redundant to even put it in there. We'll go down to rib 6. That gives me my little line so I can just walk my way right out there. See, now I know if I stay on this side of the line, I should be completely square, 90 degrees. And I'll just work down to rib 6 this way. I just got my fine sandpaper on a block, and I'll make sure this is just kiss it. Make sure it's got a little bit, leave a little bit of dust on there. It'll help keep the trailing edge off when you go to glue it on permanently. Alright, I'll just do the other side off camera now. No sense making redundant footage here. I get the other side done and we'll be ready to glue the top of the trailing edge on. And that's probably all we're going to get done today. I don't know, day is going fast here, but we're having so much fun. Actually, the wing is coming out real nice. I shouldn't say anything. Okay, I block sanded that last piece in. I have both of them done now. Next thing is I already have it cut, the top piece of the trailing edge, and get that tacked in place. Now, of course, every step of the way here, I run this through just to make sure I'm not bending the wing or twisting it or whatever. Every time you add another part to the wing, just run the no-go, no-go, go-go girl gauge right through it. I did the same thing. I made up another trailing edge piece, taped it right to the table, made up my little center splice with the angles. I don't get a stressorizer there, even though that's not really critical. But I use that trailing edge, the line on the table, which I did with a straight edge, make sure I don't have any kind of twist built into that. Now I'll wait for that CA to kick off, pull up the tape, and we'll glue on the top of the trailing edge. Now what I'm going to try to do is pick this up, use my thumb to gauge. I'm more concerned with getting a trailing edge straight, and do one rib station at a time. Just get some thin CA down in the joint. Go by one station at a time. Another way you could do this is put some alphatic down the, I don't really want to do that though, it gets messy, along there, and put some pins in here. I want to kind of speed this up. And what I'll do when I take it out of the jig, I'll get in from the inside and drop some CA down there. For right now, just going to work my way down one rib at a time. Now, I found a good way to get the CA up in this joint. Just use a full bottle and you can press the CA right up in this corner. And I want to get all the, I was having trouble doing it with a bottle that wasn't full, but you want to get all these ribs nice, glued nice, a good joint. Now we're going to true up the trailing edge and be ready to put the 1/4 inch cap on the end of it. And that's probably all we're going to get done today. Work is calling. Boy, if this George ever runs out of dirt by his property. I have to tell you a funny story. Yesterday we unloaded a dump truck full of dirt and had to take a wheelbarrow and a shovel and move it about 4 miles. Felt like I worked on the Union Pacific Railroad. Anyway, as soon as this kicks off, make sure this is nice. I'll run that sanding block right along the edge. Eyeball it, and then the last thing I'll do is check with the go, no go gauge. The go-go girl gauge, I like that. Bet Debbie likes that too. Now what this does, it gives us a nice 90-degree edge, because the edge of this wood, of course, is on an angle, so that when we get our 1/4 inch cap on, we'll have a nice flat area. And of course this is still a little flimsy in a jig. I'm just using a long sanding block, go right down it. Just giving us a little check. Everything looks kosher. Now the easiest way to set this height is just set the stripper for this height. Leave a little bit extra on, in fact. This way you won't have a lot of carving and sanding to do. You'll get it on the first shot. And when we glue it on, we'll try to get the bottom edge relatively straight, because we'll only be able to sand the top edge while it's in the fixture. Conveniently anyway. Okay, I will strip off a piece. This is just a piece. I make sure we don't have a twisted up old nonsense piece here. Make up 2 trailing edges here and make them up a little bit oversized. It's a big help. Now the best way I know to glue this trailing edge on is just run some thick CA down the bottom joint. Run it only on the bottom. Try to even up the bottom with your finger. And then when you get to the top, now we'll just squeeze this joint and run the thin CA in here, because the thin CA will kick off a little bit. This gives it a little time that you can get it nice and even. Another way to do this would be with the alphatic, but again, I'm trying to get as much done as I can today. And this may be all I can get done today. I'm trying to break this construction up into, morning sessions and afternoon sessions, so every day I get both. But like I said, George just keeps ordering more dirt. I don't know what the deal is, man. I think he's going to bury me. Now, this is the slow dry and thick CA. Now, because I have a little extra material here, I can get, when this is all done, I can get a sanding block on here, that big long sanding block, and get a real nice edge. Just make sure I have every station nice. Now I can just get this. See, I don't want to get any extra glue on here if I can help it, because I'm only going to have to sand it off. So I'm just going to work my way down here one little bit at a time, maybe 2 ribs at a time. No kicker. It makes it for a much better joint when you have to sand it. You don't have that popcorn crap on top. I get 2 ribs at a time, just run a thin bead down there. Now, if you happen to get a little extra on here, a little bubble or whatever, wipe it off before it dries. Save you all that sanding through the glue, the big lumps of glue. Now, I'm just trying to see if I have to adjust the plane. They readjusted this plane on me. Can trim off some of this extra wood. This master ass screw plane, by the way, works great. Now, you only want to take the wood off the 1/4 inch cap. You don't want to get up into the, up into the sheeting here at all. Now, the last little bit I'm getting with a number 11 blade here, just so I don't have a lot of sand and I don't want to breathe too much dust in here if I can help it. And of course, the corners, the plane doesn't go all the way down into the corners. Well, probably the last thing I'll be able to do today is block sand in that trailing edge. I have about 15 minutes to go here. Maybe I'll block sand this trailing edge in, and then that'll be it for today. Yeah, I'll get this with the small block. Got some 220, then I'll finish it off with the long block with some 320. Get a nice finish on here. What I'm really trying to do is get rid of the glue joint. I don't want the glue joint sticking up while I'm doing any of my final sanding or cap stripping or anything like that. See, I'm just supporting this with my other hand, trying to get a nice flat joint. Get rid of all the CA that sticks out on top. This is where it's really handy to have a nice long sanding block, a nice true one. All right, that trailing edge is basically sanded in now as well as I expect it. I double check, triple check, quadruple check that I haven't lost any of my alignment on the rods with the Go-Go Girl gauge. The last thing I'm going to be able to do today, I'd like to get the 1/4 inch spars in here. I'll strip off from a relatively hard piece of 1/4 inch too. Don't use punky light wood if you're going to make spars. These spars are really going to do some work here, and you certainly don't want to use 4-pound wood on them. Try to get a piece of like 7 or 8-pound wood nice and straight. Strip them off and try to get them tacked in. That'll hold this in alignment till the next day that we come to work on it. Now, believe it or not, this is one of the parts of the wing that can get to be a problem if you don't take your time. I'm doing the bottom spar first, and I'm just going to tack it into position. I'm making sure each rib is on top of the drawing, or at least as close as I can get it. And this really does require a little patience to get them all in at 90 degrees. And then as I tack glue them in, I'm going to hold my hand right underneath. So The spar notches are a little bit deeper than they have to be, and the purpose of this is I can adjust them up and down to get them even with the exact top of the rib. Again, this just takes a little bit of finesse, because you don't want the ribs off on angles, and you don't want them off standing straight up and down. Now luckily, when Joe made these ribs, there's just enough friction on the rod that I'm getting a nice fit here. Okay, now once I'm happy with that, the easiest way is to tack the two end ones. Just use your hand underneath. Again, not to put them in permanently, tack them in so you can walk around. Now that's even. Get the end one. Usually doing the two end ones first is a good idea. Now you don't want the spar sitting in, or you're not going to get the sheeting over the ribs. You want it to just be flush, each one just flush. And each one now I can adjust just a little bit. If I just go down one at a time, then what I'll do is I'll do the top one. The top one's a little easier because you can see it. It's always easy to work off the bottom here. Just tack them, one drop, in case you have to break them loose. You can always go back and break them loose if you tack it first. Just each one nice and flush. Now on previous planes I've used kite sticks, and I really didn't think that was necessary. That was extra weight. The last 2 or 3 built-up wings I've done with 1/4-inch balsa stripped out, about 7 or 8 pound wood, but mostly nice straight wood. And this is just patience now. Get each one tacked. Now before you go back and do them permanently, let that kick off. Run your finger along each one, make sure it's nice and smooth. You don't have one sitting down or sticking up. And of course, if you have one now that isn't right, just break it off and set it straight. And I'm just checking each one, make sure I don't have any that are sticking down. They all look pretty good. And of course I have a little extra clearance there. I can adjust it up and down, but I want it to be even with the top of the rib. Now I can go through with some thick CA and a Q-tips and work around each corner and get a good bond on there. And then I'll do the other one off camera. So we'll have the whole bottom spar in here real quick, and then we can go on to the top spar. But again, most of all, check the dimension you want to check is that the ribs are right in line. Each one lines up with the plans. You have to move down and sight them, and you don't want the ribs in crooked this way, or front to back, or you get funny kind of shapes in the wing. Okay, I got the whole bottom spar tacked in. Now I'm going to take the thick CA, go along with Q-tips, and get a good bond on each one of the joints on both sides, because I have a little bit of a sloppy fit around here, so that I could adjust that spar up and down. I'm just going to fill it with thick CA, then go on and put in the top spar. The easiest way I know to get a nice bead in there is just take some thick CA, go back and forth on each side of the joint. This fills in the gap. Don't use any kicker, just let it sit there. Fills in all little gaps, all the little extra clearance you needed to get that spar final adjusted. Now we're going to go on, we'll put the top spar in and the leading edge the same way, making sure we don't lose the rib alignment. And then it's going to be off to the quarry, the mud pile, whatever it is today. It looks like it's going to rain out there today. But what's nice now is I'm making progress each session. Every morning and every evening I get a little session in. And that's a real good suggestion for anybody that's short on time, is don't try to get it all done on a weekend. work an hour or two at night, hour or two in the morning. Get up early before you go to work. If you're really hot to trot to, you know, to do some extra work. I know Joe Adamusco and I talk about that constantly, about get up early, work a little, stay up a little later. I've told Midgley that too. Anyway, this is moving along, and you really, when you see some progress, and every day that I can go over and be pushing a wheelbarrow and be thinking about this, it really does make my life a little bit nicer anyway. All right, I'll do the other side off camera. And what that little bit of extra glue does, it really hardens up the wood, so it acts as a, gets rid of the stress riser, so you don't wind up with just a solid joint and then right outside of it the wood is soft. Gives it a nice little transition period. I got a little radius on each side. I'm just going to drop the top spar in the leading edge. Really looking forward. I'm going to be thinking about this all afternoon. Got half of the top spar laid in. I'm just going to lay out the other half now. Now just closing in on having a leading edge in place here. Walking down the list, one rib at a time. And this is going to just about do it. In fact, I'm actually running late here. And I'll go by. Double joint, I got the other side of the top spar in. Always make sure the end rib is in at 90 degrees so you don't have a crazy cockeyed wingtip going on there. Now when we pick this up tomorrow, we'll try to get anything that sticks up above here sanded off with a block. Not going to have time to do it today. Hey, we may get the sheeting on tomorrow, depending on how this day of work goes, if I collapse from exhaustion. Now the last step, just go by with the thick CA, put a nice big blob on each side. Because we want this to be nice and solid when we're sanding this in and truing up the leading edge. And of course the gap filling fills it in. And that should finish it up today. Alright, I'd say that was a good session. Nice session. May get some more work on this tonight, I don't know, or at best tomorrow. And, hey, it looks like, this is the part I really like. It's starting to look like an aeroplane now. Like a dinosaur or something here. Put this in a Smithsonian. Anyway, you know what time it is now. It's Home Depot time. Alright, see you after work. Now today we're going to be using this sanding block, and I wanted to show one of the good tricks. We always put these sanding strips on with contact cement. Remember we bought that number 90? When you want to get the sandpaper off, it's a relatively easy thing. I just have an ordinary propane torch, nothing special here. Heat it up almost to the point where the sandpaper turns brown. Or if you're too lazy to do this, you can even put it in the oven just to heat it up. The old glass scraper trick. Because what we're going to do from this point in the wing on, I want to be using a brand new piece of sandpaper to get all those cap strips in order. You can see this takes it right off. One of the nicest little tricks. Real nice, that'll help you. Now, I'll clean this up with acetone, put some more contact cement on, and get a brand new piece of sandpaper on the sanding block. Now this is a real good time, and I'll spend a little time right now doing it. Getting all my sanding blocks. I want to make a couple of new ones, in fact. Small, large, medium. Get 4 or 5 of them made up. Having the right sanding blocks is absolutely important. When you have a sanding block like this, and this is just a strip of aluminum, you want to make sure the edge always stays, you don't have a sharp edge or a sharp corner. You get rid of the edge in the corner. And of course, I got acetone on here. Just clean this up. Make sure there's no lumps of glue before we spray this on. It always seems like there's a little bit that just doesn't want to come off. Then we'll take some of that 90s, 3M 90 spray cement, or you can even use 77. Spray this, spray the sandpaper, get it all set new. Now this is a good time. If you're going to make up sanding blocks, make up a couple little ones. Make up one about this size is handy to have. In fact, I think we will make that one up. Just a couple. Maybe you want to renew the sandpaper on your hinge slotting tool. I don't know yet, but I'll go through my scrap. Here's another nice size. This is about the sizes that I normally would have, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of them. All nice new sandpaper. Now it's really not a good idea to spray glue inside the house, but it's a nasty day out there and I don't even want to go outside today. So what I want to do, I'll get the glue on here, put plenty of newspaper down. This stuff winds up 10 feet from where you spray it. Here's the sandpaper. Remember, this is that can of 90 that we tried when Midgley was here. Didn't work out. Well, it's not going to go to waste, that's for sure. Now, I had this big sanding block here and all the sandpaper is worn off it. I'm going to try to true this one up too. For doing ribs, this is real handy to have a nice big one. Get the edge sanded down nice and get brand new. In this case, I'll put 220 on here. And brand new sandpaper on here. I'm just trying to true this edge up a little bit. Radius off all the corners for sure. Get some spray glue on this. Get rid of this for now. You need big long sanding blocks if you want to do a nice job on these wings. Give that a couple minutes to dry. We'll be all set. Now it's best to do this on a flat table. Just press that down on a flat table. Trim it right with the edge. Now you know you don't want to get the other side stuck on here, so you kind of have to reverse this. Try to get a nice edge on here because we don't want to have a gap in there. We want to have a seam. Now it's most important to trim that edge now. Radius the corners and trim the edges nice and neat. If you have a little lip hanging off of there, it's going to make a mess out of your sanding. Now I usually take one of these little plywood blocks and just kill that edge. If you don't kill the edge, you may as well not even have a sanding block. Just another one of the tools that you're going to need if you really want to get up there and do that high quality work like Borelli and Busso and Macaluso and Adamusco. How come everybody in this hobby has a nice name except me? I can't be an Ertnowskio or something. Okay. There's a sanding block pretty much ready to go. Get the corners and the edges trued out or you're going to have a problem. And you have to renew the sand. I do this once a year anyway, maybe more. You'd be willing to pay the price and just do it. Now I made up this big block, I renewed the sand, but what I'm going to do is put a T-bar down the back of this. I'll get a piece of scrap wood. It'll just make it easier to handle, but again, even on a balsa wood, when using a balsa wood for block, you got to radius the edges, and most of all the corner, or you're going to be catching cap strips. And boy, when you look down a built-up wing and you see all those ribs just perfectly even, you can't do it. You can't build an Aries. You can't build a Nobler without a real nice sanding block. And the last thing is just press it down. That'll get it nice and flat. Put a couple good presses on it. Now I'll look around for a piece of scrap wood to make a T-handle out of that. In fact, I'll do that right now. You always have these scrap blocks laying around that are too heavy to make real top blocks out of or whatever. It's a great place to use them up. Come on, kicker. Oh boy, I love this. Now the idea here is that I'm trying to make this stay down on a flat table. Again, you don't have to make them super fancy, that's for sure. And that'll help keep the bow out of the sanding block somewhere down the road. Now whatever little sandpaper is left over, we'll make up, we got a couple little pieces. I'll look through the scrap pile, little pieces of plywood, balsa, anything, and may as well use it up, right? Of course, right. Okay, there you have a nice T-block sanding block. Okay, this will give us some good choices here when we go to sand out the rib locations. Takes a little time, you got to make a little investment in time and energy and glue and sandpaper, but now you have some really useful tools for getting all those rib stations perfectly even. Now this is an area that I like to be real careful about. I want to have each rib come right in perfectly. I don't want to have a little step or a little low spot. And you really have to go, you can't press down on this too hard. That's why you use new sandpaper, so you get a nice cut. And especially over the spar. You don't want to have it come up and then have a lump, or have it where it ends at a leading edge, there's a little point. A nice smooth transition. This will take about 10 minutes, and I'll really go nice and slow until each rib is in line with the one beside it. You just have to work away at it. It takes some time. This is one of those little areas where you don't want to rush, and you don't want to go side to side or you'll break the ribs. You want to go front to back as much as possible. Now the final thing after you get all of the sanding with the big block done is to kiss each one with the little block, and just make sure right here you get that last little bit done with the small block. That's why we make up a big block and a small block. One of the nice things about doing a 3/32 wing is you have a little bit of meat extra that blocks sand in at the end of doing all your sheeting. When you do 16th, if one side is a little high and one is low, what you wind up with is you got a very thin spot in the wood. So if you do the big block first and then finalize it off with a little block, you're going to have a real nice job. Now the next thing I want to do before I put the sheeting on is I want to make a little brace across here. 1/4 inch. Take a piece of the end pieces that we cut off of the spar and just join this. This gives us a little extra material right in the center where it's going to need the most strength. And all that is a place. Now we're going to run a piece of carbon fiber through the middle 4 ribs. Just one strand of carbon fiber. So I want to make sure this is sanded perfectly flat. In fact, if anything, a little lower to make room for the carbon fiber. I'll sand that out nice and flat and then lay that carbon fiber in there. The best way I know to get this carbon fiber down is just tack it in place and then make yourself a nice bead. And use the back of the CA applicator to just keep grinding it down to get it flat. Now this has to dry, of course. I don't want to use any kicker. Notice I'm bringing the CA out about another rib station because I don't want to stress riser right where that ends. If you notice the way Cardinals and both of them actually are built, none of the sheeting ends all at the same time. Each piece of let's call it spar structure ends at a different rib station, so you don't get a stress riser. It's super, super important. And I won't even bother kicking this off, just keep rubbing it till it goes in. It'll harden up the wood an incredible amount. And then what I'm going to do is just go along the side of the spar here so that this wood is hard. It's the center wood that's real important to me. So in other words, this spar is only going to break right in the middle. If it doesn't break in here, you could forget about it breaking somewhere else. And of course we want to grind this down. I don't want this sticking up so I have a lump in the sheeting here. Now when you get it and you're real happy that that's just about the way you want it, and you want to kick it off, just take a Q-tips or a paper towel, watch you don't get splinters. This is where you always wind up with those beautiful little splinters under your fingernail. And this gives it a slow kick. The dust in the cotton gives it a slow kick. I really think this carbon in the middle of the wing is overkill, but I've been doing it on a couple of the planes and I figure it's just cheap insurance. It doesn't add an amount of weight that you can even measure. And what I'm doing, I'm just giving this 3 or 4 more extra coats of CA and wiping them down and sanding them out so I get this contained right in the thin CA. All thin, of course. Okay, we should be pretty much ready to start measuring up our sheeting and get the leading edge sheeting on here. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to go through my pile of wood. You can see I don't have much wood left. And take the A grain, the ones that are the most like an A grain sheet for the leading edge, and the ones that really none of them are C grain, but the most B and C grain for the center section of the wing. I took the piece of wood that was the most bendable, A grain. I'm laying this out to make a pattern now because this is slightly more than a 3-inch piece of wood here. And what I stripped off a little extra piece. So this joint will be buried up in the leading edge where we'll all sand it out and everything. You won't even see it. Now the choice is I could run this even with the leading edge or with the spar. I'd rather have the joint down at the leading edge. I can bury it there. So I'll join these 2 pieces of sheeting up to make the first wing skin. Now being real careful to get that middle joint nice and straight. We want a good joint in the center of the wing where we're going to splice it. And I took this skin and sanded it out up the other end of the table so it's nice and smooth. I want to do as little sanding as I can right on the wing. And I want to get the edge where it ends at the spar nice and straight. Now I just have 2 pins holding this sheeting here so I can get a look at, make sure I'm nice and straight in here. And then when I fold this down, I come right up to the edge of the spar. Now all that pin is doing is just holding it in position there while we work it out. Now what I'm going to do is start at one end of the wing with the thin CA and work it right down, making sure that the sheeting doesn't move as we're doing this. Now I'm just doing one rib station at a time, holding it down while the CA kicks. When I did the sanding on the sheeting, of course, leave the dust on. The dust helps it kick off. And I'm trying not to press down so hard that I lose the alignment on my fixture. So far, actually, every time I've checked this, it's stayed in pretty good alignment. I guess we're just lucky this time, I don't know. But after we get the leading edge sheeting on, we'll definitely check it again. Yeah, one rib station at a time, then we'll be ready to peel this back. Now I put the thick CA in here, put it on top of all the ribs, and I'm just waiting for this to kick off. Oh, I can see some smoke coming now. Woo! Just kind of babysit it here for 10-15 seconds. Try not to press down any harder than you have to, or you lose some of the alignment on the wing. Now I looked up inside, all the ribs seem to be glued real well. Now one of the things I want to do, I want to make a little joiner here, a little piece that's going to go underneath here so that the tooth, when that other sheeting goes on, it has a little lip it can catch. That's important because we want to get as much strength as possible down the center of the wing, that's for sure. And notice I put a little reverse edge, chamfered edge. Of course this is going to go in upside down this way, and this will be a little rest, a little stop at the sheeting as it's joined. There'll be no stress riser. If you don't put this angle in, you're going to get a stress riser. Much better way. Put a little angle on all the joints, all the splices. Now see, as we put the sheeting in here, first we'll dry fit the joint, make sure we're going to have a tight joint. We don't want to have a big sloppy thing all filled with epoxy or CA. This gives us a little shelf, a little rest, I don't know what you want to call it, and that'll be a big help as far as adding strength to the middle of the wing. Alright, we got one, actually, hey, kind of making pretty good time here. Even though we don't have a lot of time today, I'll try to get the other sheeting on, the other piece of sheeting, and then I guess we're going to come back and work on this tonight, maybe do the cap strips in the center, I don't know. Now what I've been working on, I've been trying to get this fit, just an absolutely tight fit, and that the trailing edge runs right down the spar in a nice straight line. And then I have to add my little piece to the leading edge here, I'll just cut a piece off one of the other sheets. But getting this, in fact, you never really do get it perfect, because it's not a straight line, it's like a curve. And if you just keep dressing it off, just keep taking the high spots off, eventually you'll get a perfect fit there. And of course we'll make up the sheet ahead of time, pin it in position, and just repeat all the stuff that we did to glue the other sheet on. But most important is make sure we have that joint right. Now just joining that little extra piece onto the leading edge. I'll pre-sand this skin, of course, and pre-fit it, dry fit it, I guess is the right word if you're used to doing construction work, that old dry fit sheetrock term. Now getting this sheet pre-fit, pre-sanded is going to save us a lot of work down the road because we don't want to do a lot of sanding over the ribs. What happens is you pick up where the rib is coming through, you pick up the high spot and you make it thin. So trick again is all the sheeting that we're going to put on here, try to get as much of the sanding done, and we want the final thickness of the sheeting to be 3/32. I don't want to sand this down to where parts of it are 1/16 or anything. When Joe cut these ribs, he allowed for the 3/32 sheeting on that. And just try to pick up this edge, the part that's going to go over on the leading edge. Now, by leaving the dust on the part that's going to go down toward the ribs, we'll save a little bit of, a little bit of effort by not having a spray kicker down there. It'll kind of kick it off a little quicker. Leave the dust on. Now this is the main thing I'm working on, is I want these two sheets to end equal, because when I make that piece I don't want to have a staggered joint here. And I've got a pin in there just holding it temporary, and I want that nice fit. Alright, now I'm just going to repeat this. Glue the leading edge on, glue the trailing edge on. I can do that off camera just to save some time. Again, I was real happy the way the seam, in fact, let me get this on a macro lens. The seam here in the middle is just about as good as you can get it. That's real good. Of course, I put some thin CA on there and sanded it back down. It's nice and smooth now. Next step, I'm going to sheet the middle of the wing, but I'm not going to have time to do that until I get back from my errands today. I have errands, work, oh my God, too many things. But I will get some time to work on this afternoon, and we'll get the sheeting and the cap strips on this side, I hope. And today I'm just looking over what we did before, trying to figure out, be sure I'm not leaving out any steps here. At my age, you know, brain damage sets in. Oh, I may have showed this on the macro lens, how this sandwiches in here, the carbon fiber sandwiches in here real nice when we put the sheeting on. And I want to start laying out the top sheeting and the cap strips. I have time to do that tonight. Now, if you're going to use carbon fiber, you can't use carbon fiber on the surface of anything. You got to sandwich it in between two pieces of balsa. Even better, two pieces of plywood. But in this case, just want to show how nice that came out. How nice the seam came out. I can't. Boy. Borelli would be impressed. Anyway, I'm going to lay out that center piece of sheeting. Go get myself the piece of the sheeting that's left that looks the most like it's a B or a C grain, and start laying that out. Now I got one of the pieces, this is important, one end of this is kind of stiff and one is real punky. It's kind of like B grain up here and A grain here. So I'm going to put the B grain right up in the area where there'll be the most stress when I start to lay this out. You don't want to use a piece of A grain in here if possible. You'd like to get B or C. Now a lot of people that have built cardinal kits, know how I lay out this piece of wing sheeting here. I'm going to end it at rib 7 in this case. So what I do is I make a little mark out here on the wood where this is going to end, a little dot in the center line, and of course I'll connect that. Now what I do is measure this piece, do this with a little machinist ruler, and I know I have to trim back that amount. This gives you a rough idea. Rather than cutting up a bunch of wood here, you really can cut up a lot of wood for nothing. I want this reinforcing piece. Now the object of this is so you don't have a stress riser. Everywhere there's a stress and no stress, you want to have either a radius or where it tapers in. So now I know roughly, anyway, and get a rough idea about this. This is my centerpiece. Now I can just connect the dots. And I'll have a rough idea of how this is going to lay out into the leading edge, and I can block sand the rest in if there's a little curve in it. Knowing how to figure some of this out, now doing all that sheetrock work with John gave me some good tips on how to do this, how to plot things out. So if I take this dimension, I transpose it out here. Now I should be, hopefully, have that angle cut in. So the next step on this is I'll just trim that off and then block sand it in until it's a real good fit. Now if you'd like to check, a good double check to make sure you have this is slide this up on the leading edge before you actually cut it. Slide it up till that little dot is on the dividing line, and these lines should then line up. And they do, so we'll cut this, and then that's the first part of our center sheeting. And of course a brand new 11 blade is a big help. Another big help is to be Leonardo da Vinci, but we don't have that choice. Okay. Now the reality is you're going to probably want to dress this off just a little bit. You almost always never get a perfect fit on the first shot. That's the reality of this. Now what you almost always wind up doing in the final analysis, you get almost everything right and you still need just a little more material off. Very, very little off here. You look for the hard spot where it's hitting. In this case it's hitting right here. And just take off the hard spot. If you've ever had to do sheetrock work, it'll be a big help to you to know that. Okay, that looks real nice right now. Now we're going to lay out the second part of this. We want this sheeting to taper in and then have a radius here. We don't want any sharp pointy edges. Now the last thing, when you're real happy with the fit, instead of trying to make this a butt 90-degree joint, and this is a great little trick, it'll make for nicer joints, sand this back just a little bit on an angle, and then you're only catching on a little edge, and you'll get really tight glue joints. You won't have any. I'm just going to put a little bit of an angle in here. Don't change the shape. You've got the shape pretty well set up. Boy, that is a trick worth its weight in gold when you want to see nice glue joints, especially after you put a plane out in the sun, or after it's 4 or 5 years old. You don't see, you know, all the glue joints jumping through and everything. Now you see, you almost can't see where the joint is. Now with this piece just held in place, I want to use a tri-square and just lay out my, I want to go out one full rib past the end of the body. The next step is to put a dot right in the center of the sheeting, and that allows you to connect and go right out to the end. I'm just darkening up these lines. I've already got them on here. Use the same dot for the bottom of the ruler and the edge for the top of the ruler. And what you get it plotted out so that both of these angles are even. Now, what I said before is I want to have a radius in here. I want all radiuses. I'll leave this radius oversized for now and then put it in with a Dremel drum, a sanding drum, later. A Dremel sanding drum is just about the right angle. Just about the right radius, I should say. Alright, I'll just cut this piece out and we'll be ready to glue that sucker right in. I went into the other room and just hit this with the Dremel sanding drum. Make sure I'm nice and even. You don't want the sheeting hanging over the rib more than it has to, or else it starts to fade down. Make sure we have our, let's line that dot up. We have a nice wood fit here. I guess we can just glue this guy into position now. He's ready to go. Now before I glue this down, I want to mark how far out the sheeting goes, because I can put some slow CA in there. And then I just have to worry about working on a seam. Now I'll tell you, one of the things I love about my wife, she knows I'm down here working all day like a slave, working with George, working all over the place like a crazy man. She knows just when I need a cup of coffee. She brings me down a cup of coffee. And the only thing you hear from her is, "Don't get me on the video. I don't want to be on the video." I don't know, Debbie Borelli, I hear that from Debbie, I hear that from Karen. What's the deal, man? I can make you girls a movie star. Or stall it. Stall at O'Hara. Anyway, now we just have to work on the seam. Kind of let that kick off. I like those nice tight seams that don't come through in the summer. In the hot sun of Lubbock, the hot daughter of Lubbock. Boy, I just thinking about Lubbock. Oh my God. By the way, the Nats are absolutely, positively, definitely going to be in Washington State. That's a fact. Got a call from Steve Busso today, and he is the authority when it comes to where the Nats are going to be. So we're going to try to obviously make arrangements that we can be there. We really do want to go to the Nats if we can. And maybe we'll take this plane. Maybe you'll look back after the Nats video and say, "I remember when that idiot put the leading edge sheeting on. Oh, yeah." And listen, we're going to win. We're going to win. Just get this seam blended in as much as we can. For now, anyway. Alright, we're going to be ready to do this next piece. Now what worked out real nice here is this piece. The piece that we cut off of the outside, wing sheeting, which was the nicest of the pieces here. Managed to use this up. I didn't have to cut up a whole new piece. And of course I'll just butt join this in, chamfer the edges back a little bit so you just have the tips touching. I'll glue that on and we'll be ready to plot out this piece. Now plotting out this piece we're going to do pretty much in a mirror image of what was up there. Pretty much the same, no difference. Now one of my habits is I like to sand each piece as I put it in. I don't like to wait to the very end. It's like on an ongoing thing. I think you just feel better about the work you've already done. So as I add sheet after sheet, as I do a sheet, I get the joint sanded in, gives the glue a little time to kick off. Now I just got a phone call from Dennis Toth, who was at the World Championships, and he's on his way over here with a pizza pie. So maybe later today I can get some first-hand information about our illustrious FAI team and their illustrious adventures. Well, whatever. Anyway, Dennis was there. He did see it firsthand, so I'd be very interested in hearing his opinion. He probably won't want to say it on video, I know Dennis, but we'll leave the camera running and we won't tell him. Alright, anyway, there we have it. We'll be ready to sand this sucker out. I'll get this all sanded down and we're ready to start doing cap strips. Always check the fit with your hand. Don't judge just by, I see there's a low spot there. Don't judge by looking at it. When you get the fit final sanded, you're done sanding, it's perfect. One more coat of CA, wipe it with a paper towel, and re-sand it. This way you know you're not going to take a chance. The top layer of wood has some CA in it, and you won't get that beautiful thing where you put the plane out in the sun and... I love my wife. She comes down here with another cup of coffee and says, "Is that all you did tonight? What are you doing down here?" Does anybody out there have a wife like Karen? Doesn't understand how important this is. We're like curing cancer here. Okay, we're all sanded out, and I'm going to have my coffee and start doing cap strips, baby. Now here's one thing you can really save. I saved all the scraps from this job, and I'll make the cap strips out of the scraps, of course. But one of the things you want to look for, if you possibly have it on the top of the wing, you'd like to have the ones that are C grain or B grain. They'll be a little more rigid, stiffer anyway. And what I'm going to do with these cap strips, I'm going to set them just a little bit thinner than normal. I had a gauge here. Yeah, here's the gauge. Great. Anyway, cap strips are normally 1/4 of an inch. It's a piece of 1/4 inch square. I want to be just a little bit shy of 1/4 inch. Alright. And then of course I'll just strip off as many of these as I can. Try not to make my thumb into a cap strip. Using a stripper is always a good idea. This lets you get rid of all the scrap in a reasonable way. Let's see if that looks the right. Yeah, I like that. A little thinner than 1/4 inch is what we're going to do. And again, you can use up all your scraps on this. But as you notice, kind of a significant thing, you'll come across a piece of wood like this. This is C grain out on the end and A grain here. So as I work to the end, I'll try to use all that C grain stuff on the top of the wing if I can. Just make the cap strips a little stiffer. Of course, if you're a big spender like Midgley, you can just go ahead and cut up brand new pieces of sheeting. Another choice here is you can go to the scrap box, get rid of all the scrap in this way. That'll be a big help. Alright, we'll make these up and be ready to do our cap strips. Now, one of the biggest pain in the asses of doing cap strips is when the tip of the CA clogs up. And I don't know if I mentioned this on video before, I found a supply of the little Teflon tubes, and these yellow ones don't seem to clog up. If you're having a trouble with these tubes clogging up, give me a call, and I may even consider giving you a piece of that tubing for free. I had to buy a 100-foot roll, by the way, to get the corporate discount. Anyway, I'm going to take one at a time, try to get these cap strips in, and it's just a question of getting a brand new blade, cutting them ever so slightly oversized, and then just block sanding them in. Leave the dust. Leave the dust on the side you sand. That's what lets the CA kick off in a nice, real nice way. Not too fast that it bubbles up and makes popcorn, and not too slow that you sit here for a half an hour waiting for it to kick off. Make sure they're a press fit in, which in this case this is. Get the slow CA, which is what I prefer for holding these on. Now once we turn the wing upside down, of course, be no problem at all. We can get these edges perfect, but this gives you a little couple of seconds, and you kind of do it by feel. Feel the whole length of the cap strip. You want to get the cap strip right in the middle so it's like an I-beam. You don't want to have it off to one side or the other, so you can radius the edges nice. Like I said, these are a little bit thinner than 1/4 inch. Once that starts to kick off, one dot of CA on each end. And what we'll do is we'll do the whole wing and then sand them down. Alright, almost done here. Now I want to put the little corners in here before I go on to the next step, and then I want to sand one wing out. I want to put a little piece of wood here in the corner with the grain going corner to corner, and then get the Dremel tool in there and get a radius on it. Dennis Toth arrives with pizza and video.
Pizza and videos.
Now listen, Peabody, get the hint here. See, he brings a pie. What do we get? Extra cheese? Oh my God! Peabody comes over here. He don't know where the pizza parlor is. All right, let's take a break from building here and let's have a pie, man. Oh my God! Oh, I love. Now all that's left to do is a final sanding here. What I want to do. Get out my nice little sanding blocks that we just made up before. Dress each rib off. Now the idea here is to get everything nice and level without turning everything into 30-second sheet. You can really feel the high spots as you go by, too. Also, the way this curve contours in, you don't want to have a high spot right here. The silk span will be, well, it just won't look right. It'll have like a point there. Now, I also got some stuff I'm going to put on the end of this video. I got some videos from a guy named Kevin King up in Canada, and they deal with custom airbrush work. And I haven't watched them yet. I'm going to watch them maybe tonight instead of watching porno or something. I'm going to watch them and see if there's anything we possibly can use. Anything we can use in our event, obviously. And he sent me in some nice pictures. I may as well put them on this video. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, we're done with this side of the wing. I'm going to just take a little hammer and tap this off and turn this over. But I'm also at the same time going to scrape the table nice and clean, and we'll pick this up on the next tape. I want to show these pictures that Kevin King sent in and get a little idea of if we're going to be able to use some of these techniques from the airbrush tapes that he's loaned me. Now this is Kevin's shop. I'm reading off his note here. This is Kevin's shop. Notice the cardinal plans. I love it. I got to send him some more cardinal plans. That's part of this order. Nice wing jig. Looks like he's using some kind of a wing jig here. I'm not familiar with those store-bought type of jigs. Nice P40 calendar. Hey, nice stuff. Now, in relation to the, look at this. What he made me up. Made me up this Pro Stunt logo. And this is one of the things they're going to deal with on those airbrush tapes. Now, maybe what I'll do is before I send this back to Kevin. In fact, man, I'll definitely do it. I'll make up my own set of airbrush tapes, and I can loan them out. I'll bet Borelli'd be interested in looking at them. But I'll see if they're going to be worthwhile. Just looking through some of the other pictures, these are all Kevin King's planes. And this is another point here. This is one of the things we really get out of the videos. If we only could exchange still photos, well, really, I don't think it'd be that great, but the fact that we can just exchange things like this and exchange the tapes on the lettering and whatnot. Now here, I'm impressed. This is the picture of his rack, which obviously pirated from Pro Stunt videos. Look at all these planes. Skylark, Argus. Boy, oh boy, Adamusco, eat your heart out. But we saved the best for last. The best. Kevin's Cardinal. Plenty Looks like you got some competition for the nicest cardinal kit here. We got a nice logo here. Now, I wonder if he picked that up off the airbrush tapes or not. Anyway, just one more thing we can share, save, steal, shoplift, whatever, from each other. And having the videos makes it all possible. Now, believe it or not, I've been reviewing these tapes that Kevin King sent, and they're showing pretty much the way we do our lettering. It's kind of neat. In fact, anybody that's really interested in a copy of these tapes, you know, give me a call and we can make some arrangements, trade for pizzas or something. These look like real. I got 3 of them too. They're about an hour each, so maybe what I can try to do is get 2 of them on one tape and 1 on another one. Real interesting stuff, though, and I really do appreciate the people that are loaning me stuff, sending me stuff. You know, we can all learn from each other, and that's maybe the biggest lesson of all here, just to learn from each other. So I'll put a couple of inches. Well, we only got about 2 minutes left. We
don't really need a direction. We don't need a sun. We all know it's going to be on the top. We're not looking for too many highlights when we're doing this. We want the blue on the top, horizon along the middle, and that's about all we have to worry about. To keep the paint fairly light in consistency.